The Duke caught her climbing out his window. "Wrong room," she whispered. He didn't let go. The Hartwell house party was everything Josephine Blackwell had expected, and nothing she wanted. 3 days of watching her youngest sister Lily charm the drawing rooms and dance floors of Kent's finest estate had left Josie exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with physical exertion. She was tired of smiling, tired of fading into wallpaper while Lily sparkled, tired of pretending she didn't notice the way eligible gentlemen's eyes slid past her copper hair and unfortunate freckles to land on Lily's golden perfection. Not that she begrudged her sister the attention. Lily deserved every admiring glance, every whispered compliment, every hopeful suitor. At 19, she possessed the kind of beauty that made poets reach for their quills and sensible men forget their own names. More importantly, she was genuinely kind, a rare combination that made her the Blackwell family's best and perhaps only hope for financial salvation. Josie adjusted her position in the window seat of the ladies' retiring room, her book abandoned in her lap as she watched the autumn rain streak down the glass. Below, the gardens of Hartwell House stretched into grey mist, their carefully manicured hedges and gravel paths dissolving into watercolour uncertainty. Much like her own future, she thought, then immediately chastised herself for the melodrama. She was 24, firmly on the shelf, and entirely at peace with her situation. She had made her peace with it years ago, when their father's investments had failed, and their mother's health had declined, and someone had needed to manage the household accounts and stretch their meagre income, and ensure the younger girls had gowns for their seasons, even if Josie herself wore the same 3 dresses until they nearly fell apart. She was the sensible one, the practical one, the one who never complained, and never wanted, and never, ever did anything reckless. "There you are." Lily swept into the retiring room in a cloud of rose perfume and sprigged muslin, her cheeks flushed becomingly from dancing. "I've been looking everywhere. Mr. Price has asked me to walk with him tomorrow if the rain stops, and I wanted to ask if you thought Josie... Are you quite well? You look pale." "I'm fine." Josie summoned a smile. "Merely tired. You know I don't sleep well in strange houses." "You don't sleep well anywhere." Lily perched on the window seat beside her, heedless of crushing her gown. "You worry too much. About me? About the household accounts? About whether cook has ordered enough flour for the month?" "Someone has to worry about the flour." "Yes, but it doesn't always have to be you." Lily took her hand, her expression suddenly serious. "Josie, I want you to know when I marry Mr. Price, I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. You won't have to be a governess or a companion or any of those dreadful things. You'll live with us, and you'll never have to count pennies again." The casual certainty of it when I marry Mr. Price made Josie's heart clench with mingled hope and fear. Edmund Price was wealthy, well-connected, and apparently besotted with Lily. Their mother had wept with relief when his intentions became clear. Their father had actually smiled, something he rarely did anymore since the investments had failed. Everything depended on this match. Everything. "That's very kind," Josie said carefully, "but let's not count our chickens before they've hatched. Mr. Price hasn't proposed yet." "He will." Lily's confidence was absolute. "He told Lady Hartwell he intends to speak with Papa before the house party ends. Can you imagine? Me, mistress of Ashford Park? It's like something out of a novel." It was, Josie thought. Perhaps too much like something out of a novel, the kind where naive heroines discovered too late that charming suitors had ulterior motives. But she pushed the uncharitable thought aside. She had no reason to distrust Edmund Price beyond a vague sense that his smiles were too practiced and his compliments too smooth. "I'm happy for you," she said, and meant it. "Truly." Lily squeezed her hand. "I know you are. You're the best sister anyone could ask for." She glanced toward the door, where the sounds of music and laughter drifted from the ballroom below. "I should get back. Lord Ashby promised me the next dance, and you know how he sulks if one keeps him waiting." Lord Ashby. Another of Lily's admirers, though a less suitable one, a baron's son with more charm than fortune, and a reputation for wildness that made careful mammas steer their daughters away. Josie had noticed him watching Lily with an intensity that bordered on predatory, but Lily seemed oblivious, treating his attention as nothing more than flattering tribute. "Be careful with Lord Ashby," Josie heard herself say. "I don't trust him." Lily laughed. "You don't trust anyone. It's your fatal flaw, you know. Not everyone has hidden motives, Josie. Some people are exactly what they seem." She kissed Josie's cheek and swept out, leaving behind a faint trace of rose perfume and a heavy silence. Josie returned her gaze to the rain-streaked window, her book forgotten. Some people are exactly what they seem. It was a lovely sentiment, the kind of thing one embroidered on samplers and believed when one was 19 and beautiful and had never been disappointed by the world. Josie had been disappointed by the world. She had watched her father's face when he admitted his investments were gone. She had held her mother's hand through the worst of her illness, when the doctors came less and less frequently because they could no longer afford to pay them. She had worn the same worn boots for 3 winters because new boots meant her sisters went without music lessons. She knew, with the bone-deep certainty of experience, that people were rarely what they seemed. But what did it matter? Lily was happy. Mr. Price was attentive. The match would save them all. And Josie would go on being sensible and practical and invisible, because that was who she was. That was all she had ever been. She opened her book and pretended to read. The retiring room grew cold as the evening progressed, but Josie remained in her window seat, preferring solitude to the performance required in the public rooms below. She had made her required appearances, a few dances with elderly gentlemen too polite to refuse the plain eldest daughter, a conversation about embroidery with Mrs. Hartwell that had numbed her brain, a glass of tepid lemonade consumed in a corner while watching Lily shine. Now, blessedly alone, she could drop the mask. The candles had burned low, and the rain had stopped when she heard the voices. They came from the hallway beyond the retiring room door, which stood slightly ajar. Male voices, low and intimate, clearly unaware they were being overheard. Josie would have ignored them. Gentlemen often said things in private they would never say in company. But then she heard Lily's name. "Practically falling into my hand. Another week, 2 at most, and I'll have her." Edmund Price's voice. Josie went very still, her book sliding unnoticed from her lap. £100 says you can't." Lord Ashby, lazy and amused. "The sister watches her like a hawk. You won't get a moment alone with her." "The sister is nothing, plain as a pike and twice as dull. She'll fall asleep at her post eventually, and when she does—" "When she does what? You'll steal a kiss? Hardly worth £100. A low laugh that made Josie's blood run cold. "Who said anything about a kiss? I intend to thoroughly compromise little Miss Lily Blackwell. One night in my bed, and she'll have no choice but to marry me or be ruined beyond repair." Josie pressed her hand to her mouth, bile rising in her throat. "And if she chooses ruin?" Ashby sounded intrigued rather than appalled. "The family has nothing. She'd be destroyed." "Then she's destroyed. Either way—" "I win the wager." Papers rustled. "I wrote it down, you know. Signed and witnessed. Can't have you weaseling out when I claim my prize." "Always so thorough." Ashby's voice faded as they moved down the hallway. "Though I still think I could get to her first if I really tried." Their words dissolved into the general murmur of the house, but Josie had heard enough. She sat frozen in the window seat, her mind racing. Edmund Price. The charming, wealthy, seemingly perfect Edmund Price was planning to ruin her sister.
to take her innocence by design or by force, and then either trap her in marriage or discard her like refuse. And there was a wager, a written, signed, witnessed wager that proved his intentions were malicious rather than merely opportunistic. She had to warn Lily. She had to tell someone. She had to know. If she told Lily,
Lily would confront Price publicly, because Lily had no guile and even less self-preservation. There would be a scene, denials and accusations and scandal, and even if Price were exposed, Lily would be tainted by association. The whispers would follow her forever. That's the girl who nearly married the man with the wager. Did she know? Was she in on it? They say she led him on. Their mother would never survive it. Their father would be destroyed. And Lily's chances of making any respectable match would vanish like morning mist. No, Josie thought. The only way to protect Lily was to obtain proof of Price's villainy without anyone knowing it existed. She needed that wager. The signed, witnessed document that would give her leverage over Price leverage she could use to make him leave quietly, to spread no rumors, to disappear from their lives forever. But how could she possibly obtain it? The answer came to her slowly, terrifyingly, impossibly. She would have to steal it. By the time the house fell silent, Josie had formulated a plan so reckless it would have been laughable if the stakes weren't so high. Lord Ashby was staying in the East Wing, second floor. She had overheard this from a maid that morning, complaining about the extra stairs. Price had mentioned giving the written wager to Ashby for safekeeping evidence of their agreement, insurance against either party claiming the bet had never been made. The document would be in Ashby's room, probably in his writing desk or travelling case. All Josie had to do was find it. She waited until well past midnight, until the last footsteps in the hallway had faded and the last door had closed and the house had settled into the deep stillness of sleep. Then she slipped out of the room she shared with Lily, her sister's golden head motionless on the pillow, her breathing slow and peaceful, and crept into the darkened corridor. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she navigated the unfamiliar house, counting doors and praying she remembered the layout correctly. The East Wing, second floor, third door on the left. Or was it the fourth? The hallway stretched before her, identical doors marching into shadow. Moonlight filtered through a window at the far end, providing just enough illumination to see by. Josie pressed her hand to her chest, willing her racing pulse to slow. She had never done anything like this. She had never even considered doing anything like this. She was practical Josie, sensible Josie, the one who followed rules and avoided risks and never, ever stepped out of line. But if she didn't act, Lily would be destroyed. Third door. She was almost certain it was the third door. She tried the handle. Locked. Fourth door, then. Please let it be the fourth door. The handle turned under her fingers, and she slipped inside, closing the door soundlessly behind her. The room was dark, the curtains drawn against the moonlight, but she could make out the shapes of furniture, a bed against one wall, a wardrobe, a writing desk near the window. The writing desk. That's where she would find it. She crept forward, her bare feet silent on the carpet, and had just reached the desk when she heard breathing. Not her own. Deeper. Slower. Coming from the bed. Someone was in this room. Someone she hadn't accounted for. Josie's blood turned to ice. She froze, barely daring to breathe, her eyes straining uselessly in the darkness. Had she miscounted? Was this Price's room after all? Or had Ashby returned early from wherever rakes spent their evenings? The breathing remained steady. Whoever was sleeping hadn't woken. If she moved slowly, carefully, she might still make it to the door. Her hip caught the edge of a small table. A crystal decanter rattled. The breathing stopped. Josie ran. Not for the door too far, too obvious. She would be caught before she reached it, but for the window that was closer, that would give her escape. She yanked the heavy curtains aside and wrestled with the latch, moonlight flooding the room as she finally got it open. Fresh autumn air rushing in, and she was climbing onto the sill, swinging her legs over, her nightgown catching on something. A hand closed around her wrist. She nearly screamed. The sound caught in her throat as she twisted, trying to break free, trying to see who had caught her. But the moonlight was behind her now, and the face before her was in shadow, just dark eyes and sharp planes and a grip like iron. "Wrong room," she whispered. The words came out without thought, desperate and foolish. He didn't let go. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Josie's heart pounded so violently she was certain he must be able to feel it through his grip on her wrist. She was half in and half out of the window, the cold air raising goosebumps on her bare arms, her nightgown inadequate for the autumn night. One leg was still inside the room, tangled in curtain fabric. The other dangled over a 2-story drop to the garden below. "Wrong room," the man repeated. His voice was low, controlled, utterly without warmth. "An interesting excuse for a woman climbing out of a stranger's window in her nightclothes." Josie's racing mind finally caught up with her racing heart. The voice. She knew that voice. She had heard it only once, from across a crowded drawing room, declining an invitation to dance with such cold finality that the unfortunate young lady who'd asked had burst into tears. The Duke of Thornwood. She had stumbled into the wrong room entirely. Not Ashby's, not Price's, but the rooms of the most forbidding, most unapproachable, most terrifying man at the house party. A man who had spent 3 days speaking to no one, scowling at everyone, and making it abundantly clear he wished to be anywhere else. "I can explain," she said, which was a lie. She couldn't explain, not without revealing everything. "I very much doubt that." His grip on her wrist remained firm but not painful, holding her in place without crushing. "But I find myself curious to hear you try." He was in his shirt sleeves, she realized. No coat, no waistcoat, just a white linen shirt that gleamed in the moonlight, and close-fitting trousers and boots, as if he had been about to go out, or had only just returned. His dark hair was disheveled, his jaw shadowed with stubble. He looked nothing like a duke, and everything like a man who might do anything. "Please let me go," she whispered. "I'll leave, and we'll pretend this never happened, and you'll never see me again. You're Miss Blackwell." The words stopped her cold. "You know who I am? I know everyone at this party. I make it my business to know." He tilted his head, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "The eldest daughter, the chaperone, the one who sits in corners with books and pretends not to be watching everyone. I don't. You do. I've observed you." He paused. "You observe me, too. Everyone does. But you're the only one who doesn't look away when I catch you at it." Josie felt heat creep into her cheeks. She had looked at him. She had been unable not to look at him, this dark, cold stranger who moved through the glittering house party like a shadow, who radiated danger and solitude and something that pulled at her despite her best intentions. But she had always looked away. She was certain of it. "You're imagining things," she said. "I never imagine things. I find reality sufficiently tedious without inventing more of it." His grip on her wrist shifted, adjusting rather than releasing. "Now, you're going to come inside before you fall to your death, and you're going to tell me exactly why I found you climbing out my window at 2 a.m. And you're going to tell me the truth, Miss Blackwell, because I assure you I will know if you're lying." He pulled her inside. Josie stumbled over the windowsill, catching herself on the edge of the desk as he released her wrist. She immediately backed away from him, putting the desk between them, her hand pressed to her heart. "This is improper," she said. "I shouldn't be here." "If anyone discovers, then you should have thought of that before you broke into my room." He crossed his arms, leaning against the bedpost, with an ease that suggested he was perfectly comfortable with this surreal situation. "Explain." "I told you I can't." "You can. You will." Those dark eyes held hers, unblinking. "I could summon the household. Tell them I found a woman in my room in the middle of the night. Your reputation would be destroyed. Your sister's prospects would collapse. Your entire family would be finished in society." The blood drained from Josie's face. "You wouldn't." "I would rather not." A flicker of something that might have been frustration crossed his granite features. "But I am not in the habit of allowing midnight intruders to scamper away without explanation. So unless you would prefer to have this conversation in front of Lady Hartwell and the assembled guests, I suggest you start talking." She believed him. That was the terrible thing. Looking into those cold, beautiful eyes, she believed he would do exactly as he threatened. And so Josie did something she had never done before in her careful, controlled, sensible life. She told the truth. The story poured out of her in a tumbled rush: Edmund Price and Lord Ashby, the wager, Lily's innocence and their family's precarious finances, everything Josie had overheard, and everything she feared. She told him about her father's failed investments, and her mother's fragile health, and her sister's futures hanging by a thread. She told him about her plan to steal the wager as proof, to use it to make Price leave quietly, to protect Lily without anyone knowing she had ever been in danger. The Duke listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When she finished, trembling with the aftermath of confession, he said nothing for a long moment. Then he pushed off from the bedpost and walked to the window, staring out at the moonlit gardens below. "You miscounted the doors," he said finally. Yes, obviously. Ashby is in the room 3 doors down. You came to mine by mistake." "Yes." Her voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry. I'll go now. I'll find another way to—" "You'll find nothing." He turned back to face her, and there was something different in his expression now. Something she couldn't name. "Price and Ashby are rats, but they're clever rats. If you had managed to break into Ashby's room, you would have been caught. He sleeps lightly, and he keeps a pistol under his pillow. The scandal would have been spectacular." Josie swallowed hard. "How do you know about the pistol?" "I make it my business to know." He crossed back toward her, stopping just close enough to loom. "I know everything about everyone at this house party, Miss Blackwell. I know that Edmund Price owes £12,000 to various creditors. I know that his intention to marry your sister is motivated entirely by the fortune he assumes she possesses, a fortune he will discover too late doesn't exist. I know that Lord Ashby is deeply in debt to Price, which is why he participates in these schemes despite his family's ancient name." Josie stared at him. "If you knew what they were planning, why didn't you stop them?" "Because I don't care." The words were flat, final. "I came to this house party because my aunt insisted I needed society, and I have spent every moment since regretting my acquiescence. The schemes and scandals of people like Price and Ashby are nothing to me. I have no interest in playing hero." "Then why are you telling me this? Why didn't you just let me go?" He was silent for a long moment. Then, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. "Because you remind me of someone I used to know." Before she could respond, he turned away. "The wager is in Ashby's writing desk, 3rd drawer, inside a copy of Byron's poetry. He thinks he's clever, hiding incriminating documents in books. He's not." He paused. "Ashby will be occupied for the next hour. He's losing badly at cards in the library and is too proud to walk away. If you're going to do this reckless, foolish thing, now is the time." Josie's breath caught. "You're helping me?" "I'm telling you information. What you do with it is your concern." He moved toward the door, then stopped with his hand on the handle. "The servants' staircase at the end of the hall will bring you to the east wing without passing the library. The third door on the left. The window isn't locked. Ashby insists on fresh air despite the cold. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. You said you don't care. You said you have no interest in playing hero. So why are you doing this? He looked back at her over his shoulder, and for just a moment she saw something behind the ice in his eyes, something old and broken and achingly lonely. Because I haven't felt anything in 5 years, he said. And watching you prepare to throw yourself off a ledge to save your sister made me feel something. I'm not certain what, but it was unexpected. He opened the door. I'll provide distraction if you need it. The library is visible from the east hallway. If Ashby leaves the card game early, I'll intercept him. You'll... Josie shook her head, bewildered. Why would you do that? Because I'm curious. His voice was flat again, controlled, but his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her heart stutter. I want to see if you can actually do it. If the sensible Miss Blackwell, who sits in corners with books and never takes risks, can become someone else entirely when it matters. He left before she could respond, disappearing into the darkened hallway like a shadow. Josie stood alone in his room, trembling with adrenaline and confusion, and something else entirely, something that felt dangerously like hope. The servants' staircase was exactly where he said it would be. Josie crept through the darkness, her bare feet silent on the worn wooden steps, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would wake the entire household. She counted doors with trembling fingers. First, second, third. The window was unlocked. She eased it open, wincing at the slight creak of hinges, and slipped inside Lord Ashby's room. Moonlight filtered through the gap in the curtains, providing just enough light to navigate. The bed was empty, thank God. He was still at cards, and the writing desk sat against the far wall. Third drawer, copy of Byron, The Wager. Her hands shook as she pulled open the drawer. Papers rustled. She rifled through them, searching for poetry, for anything that might contain the evidence she needed. There. A slim volume, unmarked on the spine. She pulled it out and opened it to find not poems, but a folded document, covered in handwriting. The Wager. I, Edmund Price, do hereby agree to the following terms with Lord Marcus Ashby. A sum of £100 to be paid to whichever party first succeeds in thoroughly compromising Miss Lily Blackwell of Hampshire, with compromise defined as... Josie didn't read the rest. She couldn't bear to. She folded the document and slipped it into the bodice of her nightgown, her skin crawling at the thought of carrying something so vile against her body. She was closing the drawer when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Voices, male voices growing closer. Panic clawed at her throat. She looked around wildly the window. She could escape through the window, but no, the footsteps were almost at the door. She would never make it in time. The door opened. Josie dove for the only hiding spot available, the narrow space between the wardrobe and the wall. She pressed herself into the shadows, holding her breath, praying her white nightgown wouldn't catch the moonlight. Told you I don't need air. I need another drink. Lord Ashby's voice, slurred with alcohol. That bastard Thornwood cleaned me out. £300. Where does a man like that learn to play cards? Perhaps if you'd quit when you were ahead. Another voice, unfamiliar. I was never ahead. He knew exactly what he was doing. Ashby stumbled toward the washstand, missing Josie's hiding spot by inches. Did you see his face? Like stone. The man has no feelings at all. It's unnatural. Josie pressed her hand to her mouth, terrified of making any sound. Get some sleep. The other man sounded bored. You can try to win it back tomorrow. Damn right I will. The door closed. Ashby moved around the room, muttering to himself, and Josie heard the splash of water, the rustle of clothing being removed. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing him to fall asleep, willing herself invisible. Minutes passed. An eternity. Finally, she heard the creak of the bed, the settling of weight, the gradual slowing of breath into snores. She waited another 10 minutes to be safe. Then, moving with infinite care, she extracted herself from her hiding spot and crept toward the window. It groaned when she pushed it open. The snoring stopped. Josie didn't wait to see if Ashby would wake fully. She threw herself through the window and onto the narrow ledge beyond, her fingers scrabbling for purchase on the stone, her bare feet seeking balance on the slippery surface. Rain had left the ledge wet and treacherous. One wrong step, and she would fall. She didn't fall. She pressed herself against the wall and inched along the ledge, away from Ashby's window, toward the safety of the servants' staircase window at the end of the wing. The night air bit at her exposed skin. Her nightgown, damp with nervous sweat, clung to her body. The wager pressed against her breast like a guilty secret. She was halfway to safety when she heard a window open behind her. "What the devil, who's there?" Ashby, awake and at his window, squinting into the darkness. Josie froze, pressing herself flat against the wall. The shadows were deep here, between windows, but if he had a candle, if he looked too closely, another window opened. Closer this time, between her and Ashby. "Is there a problem, Lord Ashby?" The Duke of Thornwood's voice, cool and disinterested. "Some of us are trying to sleep. I thought I saw something on the ledge. Perhaps you've had too much wine." A pause. "I noticed you losing rather badly at cards. It can affect one's judgment. Now see here, Thornwood. Good night, Lord Ashby." The Duke's window closed with a decisive click. Josie heard Ashby mutter something profane, then his window closed as well. She waited, trembling, until silence settled over the wing once more. Then she continued her careful journey along the ledge until she reached the staircase window and tumbled inside. She sat on the cold wooden steps, her back against the wall, her whole body shaking with delayed terror and wild, improbable relief. She had done it. She had actually done it. The wager was in her possession. Lily was safe. And the Duke of Thornwood, the Stone Duke, the man who claimed to feel nothing, had just saved her life. She found him waiting in the hallway outside her room. Josie stopped short at the sight of him, her hand flying to her throat where the wager was still concealed. He was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, looking for all the world like he had been there for hours, though she knew that was impossible. "You succeeded," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Her voice came out hoarse. "I have it. The wager. I have proof." "Good." He straightened, and for a moment she thought he would simply walk away, disappear into the shadows as abruptly as he had entered her life. Instead, he moved closer. "You're shaking," he observed. "I nearly died. Several times." "But you didn't." His eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're braver than you look, Miss Blackwell. Braver than you believe yourself to be." "I'm not brave. I was terrified the entire time. That's what bravery is." He reached out slowly, as if he expected her to flinch away, and touched a strand of copper hair that had come loose from her braid, tucking it gently behind her ear. "Fear, and doing it anyway." Josie's heart stuttered. "Your Grace." "Sebastian." The name fell from his lips like a confession. "My name is Sebastian." "Sebastian," she whispered. The intimacy of it, his Christian name on her tongue, made the air between them thicken with something she couldn't name. "Why did you help me? Truly?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. His hand was still raised near her face, not touching, just hovering, as if he couldn't quite bring himself to withdraw it. 5 years ago, he said finally, my brother drowned. I could have saved him, but I didn't. I saved someone else instead, a servant who had fallen in first. I thought there was time. I thought—" He stopped. When he continued, his voice was rough. "I haven't touched anyone since. Haven't wanted to. The ice was easier. Feeling nothing was easier. And tonight?" His dark eyes met hers. "Tonight, you climbed onto my windowsill like a copper-haired apparition, desperate to save someone you love. And I thought, if I let you fall, if I let you fail, I will never forgive myself." "Not again." "Sebastian." Her hand rose without her permission, covering his where it still hovered near her face. His skin was warm beneath her fingers. She could feel him trembling, 2 tiny tremors that revealed the truth behind his stony facade. The Stone Duke was not stone at all. He was flesh and blood and heartbreak, hiding behind walls he had built to survive. "I should go," she whispered, "before someone finds us." "Yes." He didn't move. Neither did she. "This can never happen again. We're strangers. After tonight, you'll pretend you never met me. You'll go back to being the sensible Miss Blackwell. You'll watch your sister marry well and live a quiet life in someone else's household, and I'll go back to being the Duke who feels nothing." The words struck her like blows. He was right. This was impossible. They were from different worlds, and even if they weren't, she was nobody, a country squire's spinster daughter with no fortune and no prospects, and nothing to recommend her except copper hair and freckles and a talent for accounting. "Yes," she said, "that's what will happen." "Is it?" His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, a touch so light she might have imagined it. "Or will you lie awake tonight, as I will, wondering what might have been if we had met differently? If you had been born a duchess instead of a squire's daughter? If I had been someone other than the man who let his brother die?" "Don't." Her voice cracked. "Don't say things like that." "Why not? They're true." "Because if they're true, then this tonight means something, and it can't. It can't mean anything." She pulled her hand away from his face, stepped back until the wall stopped her retreat. "We're strangers who shared one impossible night. Tomorrow you'll leave this house party and return to your estate and forget I ever existed." "Will I?" He smiled then, and it transformed him, turned him from granite into something devastating, something that made her heart ache with longing. "You don't know me very well, Miss Blackwell." "Josephine." The name escaped before she could stop it. "My name is Josephine. Josie, to my family." "Josie." He said it like a prayer, like a question, like something he was memorizing. "I will never forget you, Josie. That much I can promise." He stepped back. The distance between them widened into something appropriate, something safe. "Good night, Miss Blackwell." "Good night, Your Grace." He disappeared into the shadows without another word. Josie slipped into her room and pressed her back against the closed door, her whole body trembling with something that felt dangerously like grief. On the other side of the room, Lily slept peacefully, unaware of how close she had come to destruction. In the morning, Josie would find Edmund Price and show him the wager and watch his face go pale with shock and fear. She would tell him to leave quietly, to never contact her family again, to spread no rumours about Lily or risk having his villainy exposed to all of London. In the morning, she would be sensible Josie again, practical Josie, the one who solved problems and faded into corners and wanted nothing for herself. But tonight, just for this one impossible night, she had been someone else entirely. She pulled the wager from her bodice and stared at it in the moonlight. Proof of evil and evidence of her own transformation. Then she thought of dark eyes and warm hands and a voice that said her name like a prayer. Sebastian. She was never going to be the same. The confrontation with Edmund Price was everything Josie had hoped it would be. She found him in the breakfast room the next morning, looking smug and well-rested, his golden hair perfectly arranged and his smile perfectly charming. Other guests drifted in and out, but Josie waited until the room was nearly empty before approaching. "Mr. Price, a word, if you please." His smile widened. "Miss Blackwell, what a pleasure. I hope you slept well. Better than you will, once you've seen this." She slid the folded wager across the table toward him, keeping her hand on it until she saw recognition dawn in his eyes. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. "How did you... That's not your concern." Josie kept her voice low and steady, though her heart was racing. "What is your concern is what happens next. You will leave this house party within the hour. You will never contact my sister again. You will spread no rumors about her or any member of my family. And if you ever attempt something like this again with any young woman, I will ensure this document finds its way to every newspaper and drawing room in London. You can't prove—" "I can. I will." She leaned closer. "Do not mistake me for my sister, Mr. Price. Lily is kind and trusting and sees the best in everyone. I am none of those things. I see exactly what you are, and I will not hesitate to destroy you if you force my hand." For a long moment, Price simply stared at her, his handsome face twisted with impotent fury. Then, with a jerky nod, he rose from his seat. "You've made an enemy today, Miss Blackwell." "I've made many enemies today." She gathered the wager and slipped it into her pocket. "You're simply the one I care about least." He stormed out. Josie allowed herself one shaky breath, one moment of triumph, before turning toward the window that overlooked the garden and finding Sebastian standing on the other side of the glass, watching her. He was dressed properly now, in a perfectly tailored coat and immaculately tied cravat, every inch the forbidding duke she had first observed from across crowded rooms. But his eyes were warm and proud, and filled with something that looked dangerously like admiration. He inclined his head slightly, a salute, an acknowledgement. Then he turned and walked away across the garden, his long strides carrying him toward the stables where his carriage was surely waiting. He was leaving. Josie pressed her hand to the window, watching until he disappeared from view. She had known this would happen, had known from the first moment that their paths could only cross once, could only intersect for one impossible night before diverging forever. It didn't make the ache in her chest any easier to bear. Behind her, she heard Lily's voice calling her name, bright and happy and blissfully unaware of the disaster that had been averted. Josie composed her features into something appropriately sisterly and turned away from the window. But she didn't stop thinking about dark eyes and warm hands. She didn't stop thinking about Sebastian. She didn't stop hoping against all reason, against all sense, against everything she knew to be true, that somehow, some day, their paths might cross again. 3 weeks later, he came for her. Josie was in her father's study, reviewing the household accounts as she had done every Tuesday for the past 8 years, when the butler appeared with an expression that could only be described as alarmed. "There's a gentleman here to see you, miss." "A gentleman?" Josie frowned. No one came to see her. No one ever came to see her. "Who is it?" "The Duke of Thornwood, miss." The quill slipped from her fingers. "He says he has a business proposition," the butler continued, clearly baffled. "Something about horses?" Josie rose from her chair on legs that felt suddenly unreliable. Tell him. I'll be there shortly." She made it to the hall mirror before her composure cracked. She was wearing her oldest dress, the grey one with the turned cuffs. Her hair was escaping its pins in copper wisps. She looked exactly like what she was, a country spinster with ink-stained fingers and no prospects. She didn't care. She walked into the parlour where Sebastian stood by the window, looking wildly out of place in her family's modest home, and felt her heart turn over in her chest. "Miss Blackwell." He turned at her entrance, and there it was, that ghost of a smile, the one that transformed his harsh features into something devastating. "Your Grace." She was proud of how steady her voice sounded. "My butler mentioned something about horses?" "A fiction, I'm afraid. Though I can certainly invent a need for your family's expertise in horse breeding if it would make this more conventional." He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping just close enough to be improper. "I lied to myself for 3 weeks, Josie. Told myself I would forget you. Told myself you were a fever dream, an anomaly, a moment of madness I should put behind me. And," the word came out as a whisper, "and I was wrong." He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, let him press her ink-stained fingers to his lips. "I don't want to forget you. I don't want to go back to feeling nothing. I want—" He stopped, and she saw vulnerability in his eyes for the first time. True vulnerability, open and terrified. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want you to come to Thornwood Abbey. I want you to help me bring it back to life. I want—" He drew a shaky breath. "I want the chance to see if this impossible thing between us might become something real." Josie stared at him. "You're asking me to what? Be your secretary? Your housekeeper?" "My partner." His grip on her hand tightened. "I won't insult you with a position that has no title. But I find myself with an estate that needs managing and a heart that needs thawing, and I can think of no one I would rather have at my side for either task." It was madness, scandal, career as a spinster over, reputation in tatters, everything she had built crumbling into chaos. It was everything she had never allowed herself to want. "Yes," she said. Sebastian's smile broke across his face like sunrise, and when he kissed her properly, thoroughly, in full view of anyone who might be watching, Josie kissed him back with 25 years of stored-up longing. The sensible Miss Blackwell, who sat in corners with books and never took risks, was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who had climbed out the wrong window and into exactly the right life. Thornwood Abbey rose from the Yorkshire moors like a monument to grief. Josie pressed her face to the carriage window as the estate came into view, her breath fogging the cold glass. She had prepared herself for grandeur. Sebastian was a duke, after all, and dukes did not live in modest country houses like her father's. But nothing could have prepared her for this. A sprawling Gothic edifice of dark stone and countless windows, its towers reaching toward a sky the colour of pewter, its grounds stretching endlessly into mist-shrouded moorland. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It looked exactly like its master, cold and forbidding on the outside, with secrets hidden in every shadow. "You're very quiet." Sebastian's voice broke the silence that had stretched between them for the past hour. He sat across from her in the carriage, watching her with those unreadable dark eyes. "Having second thoughts?" "Third and fourth thoughts, if I'm honest." Josie turned from the window to face him. "Your home looks like something out of a Gothic novel. Should I expect a mad wife in the attic? A ghostly nun wandering the corridors?" His lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "No mad wives. The ghostly nun, however, is entirely real. She appears every 3rd Tuesday in the East Wing, moaning about the dissolution of the monasteries." "You're joking." "I never joke about supernatural phenomena." He leaned forward, and suddenly the distance between them felt much smaller. "Are you frightened, Josie?" "Terrified," she admitted. "But I've discovered recently that fear and I are better acquainted than I thought. We've come to an understanding." "What sort of understanding?" that it can come along for the journey, but it doesn't get to drive the carriage. This time he did smile, that rare, devastating expression that transformed his harsh features into something that made her heart stutter. You continue to surprise me, Miss Blackwell. Josie, she corrected. If I'm to live in your house and manage your affairs, I think we're beyond Miss Blackwell. Josie, then. He said her name like he was tasting it, savouring each syllable. And you must call me Sebastian, at least when we're alone. When we're alone. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. They had been alone together exactly twice that first impossible night at the Hartwell house party, and the afternoon he had arrived at her father's home to steal her away. Both times, propriety had been bent nearly to breaking. Both times, she had felt herself becoming someone new. Sebastian, she said, testing the name on her tongue. It felt like a secret, like a promise. The carriage rolled to a stop before the Abbey's massive front doors, and Josie's stomach clenched with nervous anticipation. Whatever came next, there was no turning back. She had chosen this. She had chosen him. Now she would have to live with the consequences. The housekeeper was a formidable woman named Mrs. Crawford, whose iron-grey hair and starched apron spoke of decades of service and absolutely no tolerance for nonsense. She greeted Josie with a curtsy that was technically correct, but somehow conveyed deep skepticism. Miss Blackwell, welcome to Thornwood Abbey. Her eyes swept over Josie's plain travelling dress, her sensible boots, her copper hair escaping its pins after hours in the carriage. His Grace mentioned you would be taking on some administrative duties. Yes. Josie straightened her spine, refusing to be intimidated. I'll be managing correspondence and household accounts, among other things. Among other things. Mrs. Crawford's expression remained carefully neutral. I see. I've prepared a room for you in the East Wing, near His Grace's study. I assumed you would want easy access to the estate records. The implication was clear. She had been given a servant's room, positioned for convenience rather than comfort. Josie felt Sebastian tense beside her, but before he could speak, she stepped forward. That sounds perfectly sensible, Mrs. Crawford. I prefer practicality over ostentation. And I should mention I noticed the silver candlesticks in the entrance hall need polishing. The wax drippings suggest they haven't been properly tended in several weeks. Mrs. Crawford's eyes widened slightly. The maids have been occupied with... I'm not criticizing, merely observing. Josie smiled, and it was not entirely friendly. I've managed a household on a quarter of this estate's budget. I notice things. I imagine we'll work together beautifully once we understand each other. A long moment passed. Then, slowly, something shifted in Mrs. Crawford's expression. A grudging respect, perhaps, or at least a recognition that she was dealing with someone who could not be easily dismissed. I'll have the candlesticks seen to immediately, miss. Thank you, Mrs. Crawford. The housekeeper departed with considerably more warmth than she had arrived, and Josie released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. When she turned, Sebastian was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She asked. You're remarkable. He said it simply, as if stating a fact. 3 minutes in my house, and you've already established dominance over a woman who has terrorized my staff for 20 years. I haven't established dominance. I've established mutual respect. Is there a difference? A significant one. Josie glanced around the cavernous entrance hall, taking in the dark wood panelling, the portraits of stern-faced ancestors, the general atmosphere of elegant gloom. Your house is beautiful, Sebastian, but it feels... dead? He supplied the word without flinching. Yes, it has felt that way for 5 years. Since William. William, his brother, the one who had drowned, whose death Sebastian blamed himself for. Tell me about him, Josie said quietly. Not how he died, how he lived. Sebastian went very still. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer, thought she had pushed too far, too fast, into territory he had marked off limits. Then, he was bright, everyone said so, the clever one, the charming one, the one who could walk into any room and make everyone smile. I was always the serious one, the responsible one, the one who would inherit the title and manage the estates. A pause. He used to say I worked too hard, that I needed to learn how to enjoy life. He was always dragging me away from my ledgers, insisting I join him for some adventure or another. He sounds wonderful. He was. Sebastian's voice cracked slightly on the words. And I let him die. Josie reached out and took his hand. He flinched at the contact, but didn't pull away. No, she said firmly. You made an impossible choice in an impossible moment, and you have punished yourself for it every day since. That's not the same as letting him die. You don't know what happened. You don't know. I know you. She squeezed his fingers. I've known you for 3 weeks, Sebastian, and I already know this. You are not a man who would let anyone die if you could prevent it. Whatever happened that day, whatever choice you made, it wasn't because you didn't care. It was because you cared too much and couldn't save everyone. He stared at her for a long moment, something raw and wounded flickering in his dark eyes. Then, with a shuddering breath, he lifted her hand to his lips. You shouldn't be here, he murmured against her knuckles. You should be somewhere safe and bright and happy, not in this mausoleum with a man who has forgotten how to feel. Perhaps, but I'm here anyway. Josie smiled up at him. And I have no intention of leaving until this house feels like a home again, whether you like it or not. Her room in the east wing was small but comfortable, with a narrow bed, a writing desk, and a window that overlooked the moors. Mrs. Crawford had provided fresh linens and a pitcher of hot water, and someone she suspected the younger housemaid with the sympathetic eyes had placed a small vase of wildflowers on the nightstand. Josie unpacked her modest belongings and tried not to think about how very far from home she was. 3 weeks ago, she had been sensible Miss Blackwell, the eldest daughter who never did anything wrong. Now she was living in a duke's household, in an ill-defined position that would scandalize her mother into an early grave if she knew the truth. She had told her family she had accepted a position as secretary to a wealthy widow, a lie that had required Sebastian's assistance to construct, complete with forged letters of recommendation and a fictional employer whose name would satisfy her mother's endless questions. The deception sat uneasily in her stomach. She had never lied to her family before, not about anything important. But what choice did she have? The truth was impossible. I'm going to live with the Duke of Thornwood because he kissed me, and I can't stop thinking about him, and I want to see if love is real. She couldn't say that. She couldn't even think it without blushing. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find a young woman about her own age, with dark hair, bright eyes, and an expression of barely contained curiosity. Miss Blackwell, I'm Sarah, the upstairs maid. Mrs. Crawford sent me to see if you need anything, but honestly, I mostly wanted to get a look at you. She grinned, entirely unrepentant. You're the first new person to arrive at Thornwood in ages. Everyone's dying to know who you are and why His Grace brought you here. I'm here to help with the estate administration, Josie said carefully. Right. Administration. Sarah's grin widened. And I'm here to polish the silver. We all have our stories, don't we? Josie couldn't help but smile. You're very direct for a housemaid. Mrs. Crawford despairs of me constantly, but I grew up on the estate. My mum was cook here for 30 years, and His Grace has known me since I was in leading strings. He tolerates my impertinence. Sarah's expression softened. He's a good man, you know, under all that ice.
The servants remember him from before, when he used to smile and laugh like a normal person. We all miss that version of him." "What happened?" Josie asked, though she already knew. "To change him, I mean." "Lord William drowned 5 years ago next month." Sarah's voice dropped to a near whisper. "His Grace was never the same after. None of us were, really. Lord William was the sunshine in this house. When he died, he took all the light with him. And no one has tried to bring it back. We've tried." Sarah shrugged helplessly. "But grief has a way of settling in, doesn't it? Like dust in corners. After a while you stop noticing it's there." Josie nodded slowly, a plan beginning to form in her mind. "Sarah, I'm going to need your help, and probably Mrs. Crawford's too, eventually. I have some ideas about this house." "What sort of ideas?" "The sort that involve opening windows and cutting flowers and reminding everyone that life goes on, even after loss." Josie met Sarah's eyes steadily. "I'm going to bring this house back to life, Sarah, and I'm going to need allies." Sarah's grin returned, brighter than before. "Miss Blackwell, I think you and I are going to get along wonderfully." The estate records were a disaster. Josie discovered this on her second day at Thornwood, when Sebastian finally granted her access to his study and the mountain of papers that had accumulated there over 5 years of neglect. Ledgers lay open on every surface, their columns incomplete and their figures contradictory. Letters from tenants and tradesmen spilled from pigeonholes, many of them clearly unanswered. The estate steward's quarterly reports were stacked haphazardly on a side table, their seals unbroken. "Good Lord!" Josie stared at the chaos in disbelief. "How have you been managing this place?" "Badly, apparently." Sebastian stood in the doorway, watching her reaction with something like embarrassment. "My steward handles the day-to-day operations. I'm meant to review his reports and make decisions about larger matters. I haven't been attentive. That's one word for it." Josie picked up a letter at random and scanned its contents. "This is from your solicitor in London. It's dated 6 months ago. He's asking for authorization to renew the lease on 3 tenant farms. Did you ever respond?" "I don't remember." "Sebastian." She set the letter down with careful control. "This estate employs dozens of people. Hundreds. If you count the tenant farmers and their families, their livelihoods depend on you making decisions. You can't just stop." "I didn't stop. I delegated." "Delegating requires oversight. You've simply abdicated." The words came out sharper than she intended, and she saw him flinch. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "No, you're right." He moved into the room, his expression bleak. "I know I've been failing. I've known for years. I simply couldn't bring myself to care. Because caring hurts. Because caring means engaging with the world. And the world is where William died." Josie's heart clenched. She crossed the room and took his hands, ignoring the impropriety of it. "Listen to me," she said quietly. "You are not responsible for William's death. Whatever happened, whatever choice you made, you were trying to save lives. That doesn't make you a murderer. It makes you a man who was faced with an impossible situation and did the best he could. You don't know? Then tell me." She squeezed his fingers. "Tell me what happened. Stop carrying this weight alone." For a long moment, he was silent. She could see the war playing out behind his eyes, the desperate desire to unburden himself, fighting against 5 years of carefully constructed walls. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, he began to speak. "We were at the lake," Sebastian said. "William and I, along with several servants. It was early autumn, sunny and warm. William had insisted on taking the boat out. He loved sailing, always had, and I had agreed because I could deny him nothing. I never could."
Josie guided him to a chair and settled him into it, then took the seat across from him. She didn't speak, didn't push. She simply waited. The storm came out of nowhere. One moment the sky was clear. The next, the wind was howling and the waves were crashing over the bow. The boat capsized. We were all thrown into the water. Sebastian's voice had gone flat, mechanical, as if he were reciting someone else's story. I surfaced and saw two people struggling. One was Thomas, our footman. The other was William. They were both going under. I had to choose. Sebastian. I chose Thomas. The words came out raw, broken. I chose the servant over my brother, because Thomas was closer, because I thought I could reach William after, because I made a split-second decision, and I made the wrong one. That's not. By the time I got Thomas to shore, William was gone. I dove back in. I searched for hours. I nearly drowned myself trying to find him. Sebastian's hands were shaking in hers. They found his body 3 days later, washed up on the other side of the lake. And every day since, I have asked myself, what if I had chosen differently? What if I had swum for William instead? Then Thomas would be dead. Josie kept her voice gentle but firm. You didn't choose to let William die, Sebastian. You chose to save the person you could reach. That's not murder. That's mathematics. He was my brother. And Thomas is someone's son, someone's friend, someone who is alive today because you made an impossible choice in an impossible moment. She lifted one hand to his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. You are not a villain for failing to save everyone. You are a hero for saving anyone at all. I don't feel like a hero. Heroes rarely do. She traced her thumb across his cheekbone, feeling the tension in his jaw. You feel like a man who has been drowning in guilt for 5 years, and I think it's time someone taught you how to swim again. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, something in his expression shifted a crack in the ice, a glimpse of something warm beneath. How do you do that? He asked quietly. Do what? Make me believe things might get better, even when everything in me says they won't. Josie smiled. It's a gift. Also, I'm very stubborn. Ask my sisters. I would like to meet them someday. Your sisters. Perhaps you will. She released his face and sat back, trying to restore some semblance of professional distance. But first we have work to do. This estate isn't going to manage itself, and I refuse to let you hide in your grief while good people suffer the consequences. Sebastian's lips twitched. You're quite bossy, you know. I prefer assertive. Now, shall we start with the tenant reports or the solicitor's correspondence? The tenants. If their leases haven't been renewed, they must be terrified of eviction. Good choice. Josie reached for the first stack of papers, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Let's begin. The work was absorbing, consuming, exactly what Josie needed to distract herself from the fact that she was living in a duke's house and falling more deeply in love with him every day. Because she was falling. There was no denying it now. It happened in small moments, the way Sebastian's brow furrowed when he concentrated on a difficult letter, the way he unconsciously reached for her hand when bad news arrived, the way he actually laughed when she made a particularly sharp observation about the estate steward's creative accounting. It happened in long afternoons spent side by side at his desk, their shoulders nearly touching as they reviewed reports. It happened in quiet evenings in the library, when he read aloud from his favorite books, and she pretended not to notice how beautiful his voice was. It happened when he looked at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. You're staring again, Sebastian said without looking up from his letter. Josie startled. I wasn't staring. I was thinking. You were thinking while staring at my face. I could feel it. You're very arrogant for a man who hasn't answered his solicitor in 6 months. I've answered 3 solicitors' letters this week alone. I think I've earned the right to a little arrogance. He set down his pen and turned to face her fully. What were you thinking about? That I love you. That I want to spend the rest of my life in this room, doing exactly this, forever. I was thinking about the estate accounts, she lied. Your income exceeds your expenditure by a significant margin. You could afford to make improvements. What sort of improvements? The tenant cottages need new roofing. Several of the farm buildings are in poor repair, and the village school lost its teacher last year and hasn't been able to find a replacement because the salary is too low. She watched his face carefully. You could change lives, Sebastian. Real, tangible change. All it would take is money you're not even using. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you've thought about this a great deal. I told you. I notice things. So you did? He rose from his chair and moved to the window, staring out at the grey Yorkshire sky. My father believed that charity encouraged laziness. He kept the estate profitable by keeping expenditures low. I've simply continued his policies. Your father sounds charming. He was a bastard, actually. Cold, cruel, obsessed with legacy. Sebastian's voice was flat. He preferred William because William was charming and easy to love. I was merely useful. Josie's heart clenched. Sebastian, don't. He held up a hand. I don't want your pity. I'm simply explaining why I've allowed this place to stagnate. It's what I was trained to do. Maintain, preserve. Don't change anything that might disturb the order of things. But that's not who you are. She rose and went to him, standing close enough to feel the warmth of his body. I've seen who you are, Sebastian. You're a man who saves servants from drowning. A man who helps strange women retrieve stolen wages from villains. A man who crosses half of England to offer a country nobody a position she wasn't qualified for, just because he couldn't stop thinking about her. He turned to face her, and she saw surprise in his eyes. I never said I couldn't stop thinking about you. You didn't have to. She smiled up at him. I notice things, remember? The air between them thickened. His hand rose to her face, fingers tracing the line of her jaw with devastating gentleness. Josie. Her name was a question, a plea, a warning all at once. We shouldn't. I know. If anyone discovered, I know. I can't offer you anything. Not really. Not without destroying your reputation and my family's expectations and... She kissed him. It was impulsive and reckless and everything sensible Josie Blackwell would never have done. But sensible Josie was gone, transformed by midnight escapades and impossible choices and weeks of falling hopelessly in love with a man who believed himself unworthy of it. Sebastian froze for a heartbeat. Then his arms came around her, and he kissed her back with 5 years of hunger, of loneliness, of desperate wanting finally set free. His mouth was hot against hers, demanding and giving in equal measure, and Josie felt herself dissolving into sensation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. That was inadvisable, he murmured. Completely. She was trembling. Shall we do it again? His laugh was low and rough. God, yes. He kissed her again, gentler this time. One hand tangled in her copper hair, while the other pressed against the small of her back. She melted into him, lost in the taste of him, the feel of him, the absolute rightness of being in his arms. A knock at the study door sent them springing apart like guilty children. Your Grace, Mrs. Crawford's voice came through the wood. Your cousin has arrived. He's waiting in the drawing room. Sebastian's expression shuttered. "Tell him I'll be down shortly." "Yes, Your Grace." Footsteps retreated down the hallway. In the silence that followed, Josie watched Sebastian's face close off, walls rising where moments ago there had been openness. "Your cousin," she said carefully, "Lord Marcus Ashworth, my father's nephew, the presumptive heir to the dukedom, at least until I produce a legitimate son." Sebastian straightened his cravat with sharp, angry movements. "He visits every few months to remind me of my failures and hint that I should either marry someone appropriate or do him the favor of dying. He sounds delightful. He's a vulture." Sebastian turned to face her, and she saw something like fear in his eyes. "Josie, you can't let him know about us, about any of this. If he realizes you're more than a secretary, he'll use it. He'll destroy you to get to me." "There's nothing to know," she said, even though they both knew it was a lie. "I'm here to manage your estate." "Nothing more." "Nothing more." He repeated the words like a curse. "Yes, that's what we'll tell him." He left the study without another word, and Josie sank into his abandoned chair, her lips still tingling from his kisses and her heart heavy with foreboding. She had known this couldn't last, had known from the first moment that she was playing a game she couldn't win, but she hadn't expected it to hurt this much when reality came crashing in. Lord Marcus Ashworth was everything Josie expected and nothing she wanted. She observed him from a doorway that evening, watching as he held court in the drawing-room with Sebastian seated stiffly across from him. Marcus was handsome in a calculated way, golden hair artfully arranged, features pleasantly symmetrical, smile exactly 3 degrees too wide to be genuine. He looked like a portrait of an aristocrat, painted to impress rather than to capture truth. His daughter sat beside him, a pale young woman named Lady Helena, who watched Sebastian with hungry eyes and never spoke unless her father permitted it. "You're looking well, cousin," Marcus was saying. "Country air agrees with you, though I must say, I was surprised to hear you've hired a new secretary, a female secretary no less." "Miss Blackwell comes highly recommended," Sebastian said flatly. "She's transformed the estate management in a matter of weeks. I'm sure she's very efficient." Marcus's smile took on a knowing edge. "Still, one does wonder about the propriety of having an unmarried woman in residence. People will talk." "People always talk. I've long since stopped caring." "Perhaps that's the problem." Marcus leaned forward, his expression suddenly intent. "You've stopped caring about everything, Sebastian. Your reputation, your responsibilities, your duty to continue the family line." A pause. "Helena is 19 now, accomplished, beautiful, from an excellent family. It would be a suitable match." Lady Helena coloured prettily, her eyes fixed on her lap. Sebastian's jaw tightened. "I'm not in the market for a wife." "You should be. You're 32 years old with no heir. If something happened to you tomorrow, the title would pass to me, and I confess I have no interest in shouldering your burdens." Marcus spread his hands. "Marry Helena. Secure the succession. Then you can retreat to your moors and brood in peace." "I'll take it under advisement." "Do." Marcus rose, pulling Helena up with him. "We'll be staying through the end of the month. Lady Harriet has graciously offered us rooms in the Dower House. I look forward to continuing this conversation." He swept out, Helena trailing behind like a pale ghost. Josie stepped back into the shadows as they passed, her heart pounding. Marcus hadn't noticed her, or if he had, he'd dismissed her as a servant, but she had noticed him, had noticed the calculation in his eyes, the oily charm that overlay something darker. He was dangerous, and he wanted Sebastian's dukedom. The next 2 weeks were an exercise in careful deception. Josie threw herself into her work, maintaining rigid professional distance whenever Marcus or Helena might be watching. She kept to her room in the East Wing, took meals in the servants' hall, and avoided any situation that might suggest she was more than a glorified clerk. It was agony. Sebastian, for his part, played his role with grim determination. He entertained his cousin with cold politeness, allowed Lady Helena to flutter around him at dinner parties, and gave no indication that his secretary was anything more than useful furniture. But sometimes, late at night, Josie would hear footsteps outside her door, hesitant, lingering, and know that he was fighting the same battle she was. It was Lady Harriet who finally broke the stalemate. Sebastian's aunt lived in the dower house on the edge of the estate, a woman of 70-odd years with sharp eyes and absolutely no patience for foolishness. She had invited Josie to tea on her third day at Thornwood, and had spent the entire visit asking pointed questions about her family, her education, and her intentions toward my nephew, who is too foolish to recognize a treasure when it falls into his lap. Josie had liked her immediately. Now, 2 weeks into Marcus's unwelcome visit, Lady Harriet summoned Josie to the dower house with a cryptic note that read simply, "We need to talk. Come immediately. Bring biscuits." Josie brought biscuits. "Sit down, child." Lady Harriet waved toward a comfortable chair by the fire. "And stop looking so nervous. I'm not going to eat you." "I wasn't aware I looked nervous." "You look like a rabbit who's just noticed a fox. It's quite unbecoming for a woman who climbed out of my nephew's window to steal evidence from a villain." Lady Harriet smiled at Josie's shocked expression. "Oh, yes, I know all about that. Sebastian tells me everything eventually. I'm the only person left in the world he trusts." "I didn't realize that he talks to me." "He didn't, for years. After William died, he stopped talking to anyone. But lately—" Lady Harriet's expression softened. "Lately he's been different, more present, almost hopeful." Her sharp eyes fixed on Josie. "I don't suppose you know anything about that?" Josie felt heat rising to her cheeks. "I've been helping with the estate management. Perhaps that's given him a sense of purpose. Perhaps. Or perhaps it's given him something else entirely." Lady Harriet reached out and took Josie's hand in her own weathered grip. "I know you love him, child. Anyone with eyes can see it. And I know he loves you, even if he's too stubborn and scared to say it." "Lady Harriet, don't interrupt. I'm old, and I haven't got time for false modesty." The old woman leaned forward intently. "Marcus is pushing Sebastian to marry Helena. He's been doing it for years, ever since Sebastian's parents died, and there was no one left to arrange a suitable match. Sebastian has always refused, but his defenses are weakening. He thinks he doesn't deserve happiness. He thinks marrying for duty is all he's worthy of. That's not true. Of course it isn't. But he won't believe it coming from me. He might believe it coming from you." Lady Harriet squeezed her hand. "Fight for him, Josephine. Fight for both of you. Because if you don't, Marcus will win, and Sebastian will spend the rest of his life married to a mouse who will make him miserable. What can I do? I'm nobody, a country squire's daughter with no connections and no fortune. If I declared my feelings publicly, it would ruin us both. Then don't be public about it. Be private. Be strategic." Lady Harriet released her hand and sat back. "You didn't climb across that ledge by announcing your plans to the household, did you? You were quiet, clever, brave." A smile. "Be quiet and clever and brave again, and trust that some risks are worth taking." The confrontation came 3 nights later. Josie had retired early, pleading a headache that wasn't entirely fictional. The strain of pretending not to love Sebastian was giving her actual physical pain. She was sitting at her writing desk, composing a letter to Lily about the fictional widow's fictional household, when her door opened without warning. Sebastian stood in the doorway, still dressed for dinner, his cravat loosened and his dark hair dishevelled. He looked wild, desperate.
Marcus has given me an ultimatum, he said without preamble. He's threatened to contest my management of the estate if I don't announce my engagement to Helena by the end of the month. Josie's heart stuttered. Can he do that? He can try. The suit would be frivolous. I've done nothing wrong, but the scandal would be devastating. Investigations, hearings, every detail of my life dragged before Parliament. Sebastian's voice was ragged. Including you. I'm just your secretary. You're the woman I love. The words hung in the air between them, raw and unguarded. You're the woman I've loved since the moment you whispered "wrong room" on my windowsill. And if Marcus discovers that, he'll use it. He'll destroy you to get to me. Josie rose from her chair on shaking legs. Then don't let him discover it. How?
I can barely look at you without giving everything away. I can barely breathe when you're in the same room. He crossed to her in 3 quick strides, his hands gripping her shoulders. Josie, I have spent 5 years convincing myself I don't deserve to be happy, that I killed my brother through my own bad judgment and should spend the rest of my life atoning for it. And then you appeared beautiful, brave, impossible, and for the first time since William died, I wanted something for myself. Sebastian, I cannot marry Helena. I cannot spend the rest of my life bound to a woman I don't love, while you exist in the world somewhere, beyond my reach. His voice cracked. But I cannot destroy you either. I cannot take your reputation and your future and sacrifice them on the altar of my own selfish wanting. Tears were streaming down Josie's face. She hadn't even realized she was crying. What if I want to be destroyed? She whispered. What if I would rather be ruined with you than respectable without you? You don't mean that. I do. She reached up and cupped his face in her hands. Sebastian, I have spent my entire life being sensible, doing the right thing, putting everyone else's needs before my own. And I am so tired of it. I am so tired of being the responsible one, the practical one, the one who never wants anything. What do you want? You. The word came out like a prayer. I want you. I want to wake up beside you and argue with you about estate accounts and grow old watching you smile more often. I want a life that's mine, not a life I've borrowed from other people's expectations. Josie, I love you. She said it clearly, firmly, without shame. I love you, Sebastian Ashworth, and I don't care what it costs. He kissed her then, not gently, not carefully, but with all the desperate hunger of a man who had been starving and finally found sustenance. She kissed him back with equal fervour, pouring everything she felt into the press of her lips against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, his forehead rested against hers. I cannot ask you to sacrifice everything for me, he murmured. You didn't ask. I offered. It's not that simple. No, she agreed. It isn't. But nothing worth having ever is. He pulled back slightly, his dark eyes searching her face. I need time. To think. To plan. Marcus cannot be allowed to win, but neither can I throw you to the wolves without protection. What kind of protection? The kind that makes you untouchable. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. Will you trust me, Josie? For a little longer? She wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, explanations, assurances. But she looked into his eyes and saw something she had never seen there before. Hope. I trust you, she said. He kissed her once more, soft, sweet, a promise. And then he was gone, leaving her standing alone in her small room, with her heart pounding and her future uncertain. Whatever came next, she had told him the truth. She loved him, and she would face whatever consequences that love demanded. The letter arrived from her family 3 days later, forwarded from the fictional widow's fictional address. Lily was engaged. The wedding was in 6 weeks. And Josie's presence was required, not just desired, but desperately needed, according to her mother's increasingly frantic postscript. She showed the letter to Sebastian in his study, watching his face as he read. "You have to go," he said quietly. "I know. Your sister needs you. Your family needs you. I know." She took the letter back, folding it carefully. "But I don't want to leave. Not now. Not when everything is so uncertain. Perhaps it's better this way." He rose from his chair and moved to the window, his back to her. "Some distance. Some time to think clearly. Is that what you want? Distance? I want you safe." He turned to face her, and she saw the conflict in his eyes. "I want you far from Marcus's scheming and society's whispers and everything that could hurt you. And I want—" His voice broke. "I want you here. With me, every moment of every day. But I can't have both. Sebastian, go to your sister's wedding. Be with your family. Remember what normal feels like." He crossed the room and took her hands in his. "And when you come back, if you come back, I will have a plan. A way forward that doesn't require you to sacrifice everything. And if there is no such way, then we'll make one." He lifted her hands to his lips. "I love you, Josie. I should have said it before. I should have said it 1,000 times. But I was afraid that saying it aloud would make it real, and real things can be lost. I'm not going anywhere. Not yet. But you might. Once you remember what it's like to be Miss Blackwell of Hampshire instead of whatever impossible thing you've become here." His smile was sad. "I won't blame you if you choose safety. I won't blame you if you decide I'm not worth the risk." Josie stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of his body, and looked up into his dark, troubled eyes. "I climbed out a window for you," she said quietly. "I crossed a ledge in my nightgown. I lied to my family and travelled across England and fell in love with a man everyone calls the Stone Duke. Do you really think a few weeks apart will change my mind? I think you deserve better than a broken man who can barely manage his own estate, let alone—" She kissed him. Not gently, she was tired of gentle, but fiercely, desperately, pouring everything she felt into the press of her lips. He responded in kind, his arms coming around her, pulling her close, and for one perfect moment, nothing else existed. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, she pressed her hand against his chest and felt his heart racing beneath her palm. "I'll go to the wedding," she said. "I'll be with my family. I'll remember what normal feels like. And then I'll come back to you, Sebastian, because you're worth more than normal. You're worth everything." She left the study before he could respond, before her resolve could weaken, before she could do something truly reckless like refuse to leave at all. But she carried his kiss with her all the way to Hampshire, and she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that she would carry it forever. The Blackwell household was chaos when Josie arrived. Lily's engagement to Viscount Westbrook's son had sent her mother into raptures, and her father into financial calculations that made his eyes cross. The modest house was overrun with seamstresses, florists, and various relatives Josie barely remembered, all offering opinions on everything from table linens to trousseau. Josie threw herself into the preparations with determination that bordered on desperation. She organized. She planned. She mediated disputes between her mother and the florist, between Lily and the seamstress, between her father and the wine merchant. She was so busy being useful that she almost managed not to think about Sebastian every waking moment. Almost. "You're different," Lily said on the third day, finding Josie alone in the garden. "Something's changed." "I don't know what you mean." "You're sadder and happier, both at once." Lily sat down beside her on the bench. It's a man, isn't it? You've fallen in love. Josie considered denying it, considered spinning another story, another fiction to protect herself. But this was Lily Sweet, trusting Lily, who had almost been destroyed by a villain's scheming and had been saved by a sister's reckless bravery. Yes, she admitted, I've fallen in love. With whom? Is it someone from the widow's household? A neighbour? There is no widow. The confession came out before Josie could stop it. I lied, Lily. I've been living at Thornwood Abbey in Yorkshire, working for the Duke of Thornwood. Lily's eyes went very wide. The Duke of... But that's Josie. That's the man from the Hartwell party, the one everyone calls the Stone Duke. His name is Sebastian. You're in love with a duke? I'm in love with a man. Josie's voice cracked. A man who lost his brother and hasn't forgiven himself. A man who was frozen solid until I stumbled into his life and accidentally thawed him. A man who loves me but can't marry me without destroying both our reputations. Lily was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and took Josie's hand. You saved me, she said quietly. At the Hartwell party. I never asked how you knew about Mr. Price, about the wager. I was too relieved, too grateful. But it was him, wasn't it? The Duke. He helped you. Yes. And now you're afraid you'll lose him. Because you're not a lady, and he's a duke, and the world is cruel to people who don't follow its rules. Yes. Lily squeezed her hand. Then we'll find a way. You didn't let me be destroyed by Edmund Price. I won't let you be destroyed by circumstance. There's nothing you can do. Nothing anyone can do. There's always something. Lily's expression was fierce, fiercer than Josie had ever seen it. You spent your whole life sacrificing for this family, for me. It's time someone sacrificed for you. The wedding was beautiful. Lily married her Viscount's son beneath a canopy of autumn flowers, her face radiant with joy, her voice steady as she spoke her vows. Josie stood as her sister's attendant and tried not to cry, tried not to think about the man she had left in Yorkshire, tried not to wonder if she would ever have a wedding of her own. The breakfast afterward was loud and cheerful, full of congratulations and toasts and the general chaos of a family celebration. Josie smiled until her face ached and answered questions about her position with the widow and pretended that everything was fine. She was pouring herself a glass of wine she desperately needed when she heard the murmur begin. It started at the edges of the room, whispers, turned heads, a ripple of surprise that spread like water on glass. Josie looked up, confused, and saw her mother standing frozen in the doorway, her face a mask of shock. Josephine, her mother managed, there's someone here to see you. Josie set down her wineglass. Her heart was pounding, though she didn't know why. She walked to the doorway and found Sebastian standing in her family's modest entrance hall, looking wildly out of place in his perfectly tailored coat and immaculately tied cravat, his dark eyes finding hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Josie. He said her name like a prayer, like a question, like an answer all at once. I couldn't wait. I tried, but I couldn't. I had to see you. I had to tell you. Sebastian. What are you? I love you. The words came out loud enough for everyone to hear, her family, the wedding guests, the servants gathered in doorways. I love you, Josephine Blackwell, and I am done being afraid of it. He dropped to one knee. The room went absolutely silent. I am broken, he said. Difficult. Damaged by grief and guilt and 5 years of refusing to feel. I cannot promise I will be easy to love, but I can promise that I will spend every day of my life trying to deserve you. I can promise that I will never stop fighting for us. And I can promise... His voice cracked. I can promise that you are worth more to me than my reputation, my position, my family's expectations, or anything else the world might demand I sacrifice." Josie's hands were shaking. Tears were streaming down her face. "Sebastian, marry me, Josie." He held up a ring, a simple band of gold with a single emerald, nothing like the ornate jewels a duchess should wear. "Be my wife. Be my partner. Be the woman who makes me want to live again." 100 responses flooded her mind. Practical objections, social considerations, the 1,000 reasons why this was impossible, inadvisable, insane. She ignored all of them. "Yes," she said. The room erupted. Sebastian rose from his knee and pulled her into his arms, kissing her thoroughly in front of 100 witnesses who would gossip about this moment for the rest of their lives. Josie kissed him back, laughing and crying at the same time, her heart so full she thought it might burst. When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "I should have done this weeks ago," he murmured. "I should have done it the moment you told me you loved me. You needed time. I needed courage." His arms tightened around her. "Your Aunt Harriet helped me find it." "Lady Harriet?" "She wrote me a letter, told me I was being a fool, reminded me that William would want me to be happy." His voice was rough. "She included a letter William wrote before he died. He was worried about me, apparently. Thought I worked too hard, smiled too rarely. Hoped I would someday find someone to love me properly." Josie's heart clenched. "Oh, Sebastian. I've been living in his shadow for 5 years, punishing myself because he's gone and I'm still here. But he wouldn't want that. He'd want me to live, to love, to stop being such a bloody fool." She laughed through her tears. "Language, Your Grace. Forgive me. I'm proposing to the woman I love in front of 100 strangers. My vocabulary has abandoned me." "I forgive you." She pressed a kiss to his jaw. "I'll always forgive you." Behind them, Josie's mother had recovered enough to start asking questions about wedding dates. Her father was staring at Sebastian with an expression of shell-shocked wonder. Lily was crying and laughing and trying to explain to her new husband that yes, her sister really was engaged to a duke. It was chaos. It was wonderful. It was exactly the kind of happily ever after Josie had never allowed herself to imagine. But there was still something she needed to know. "What about Marcus?" she asked quietly. "His ultimatum? The threat to contest your management of the estate?" Sebastian's smile turned sharp. "I had a conversation with him before I left. It seems his own estate management has some irregularities that he would prefer remained private. We've reached an understanding." "What kind of understanding?" "The kind where he withdraws his objections and I don't expose his creative accounting to the authorities." Sebastian's eyes gleamed. "Lady Helena, I'm told, is greatly relieved. Apparently she's been in love with the curate in her home village for years and is delighted not to be forced into a loveless marriage." "How very tidy." "I thought so." He pulled her closer. "Now, Miss Blackwell, soon to be your Grace, shall we face your family together? I suspect there are questions." "Hundreds of them." "Then we'd better start answering." He tucked her hand into his arm and turned toward the crowd of curious, delighted, thoroughly scandalized wedding guests. Josie took a deep breath and stepped forward. The sensible Miss Blackwell, who sat in corners with books and never took risks, was about to become a duchess, and she couldn't wait. The scandal was magnificent. Within 3 days of Sebastian's proposal at Lily's wedding breakfast, every drawing-room in London was buzzing with the news. The Stone Duke, the reclusive, grief-stricken Duke of Thornwood, had thrown himself at the feet of a country nobody, a squire's spinster daughter with copper hair and freckles and absolutely no fortune to speak of. He had done it publicly, dramatically, in front of 100 witnesses who were only too delighted to share every detail with anyone who would listen. The gossip sheets went mad with speculation. Had she compromised him? Had he compromised her? Was she secretly an heiress? A foreign princess in disguise? The illegitimate daughter of someone important? The theories grew wilder with each passing day, fed by the complete absence of any rational explanation for why one of England's most eligible bachelors would choose so spectacularly beneath him. Josie read the papers with a mixture of horror and hysterical amusement, curled up in her childhood bedroom while her mother attempted to plan a duchess's wedding on a squire's budget. "They're calling me the Ledger Bride," she told Sebastian, when he visited properly chaperoned now, since their engagement had made propriety both possible and necessary. "Apparently someone discovered I was managing your estate accounts and decided it was the most romantic thing they'd ever heard." "It is romantic." Sebastian's lips twitched. "I fell in love with a woman over quarterly profit statements. The poets will be writing about us for centuries. The poets are writing about us now. Badly." She passed him a particularly egregious example, a broadsheet ballad titled "The Duke and His Bookkeeper" that rhymed ledger with pledge her, and got progressively worse from there. Sebastian read it with growing horror. This is an assault on the English language. Verse 7 compares my eyes to emeralds. Verse 8 suggests your heart was as cold as your estate's northern exposure until I warmed it with my accounting skills. I'm going to have whoever wrote this transported to Australia. You can't transport people for bad poetry. I checked. He looked up at her, and despite the absurdity of the moment, his eyes were warm with love. "I'm sorry. For all of this. For the gossip and the ridicule and the way the world has decided to make our love into entertainment. Don't be." Josie took the broadsheet from him and tossed it into the fire. "I expected worse. I expected to be shunned entirely, not turned into a romantic heroine. If the worst consequence of marrying you is terrible poetry, I consider myself fortunate." "You're remarkable." "I know." She grinned at him. "Now shall we discuss the seating chart for the wedding breakfast? My mother has very strong opinions about where your Aunt Harriet should sit." The wedding preparations consumed the next 6 weeks. Sebastian had insisted on a London ceremony. If we're going to scandalize society, we might as well do it properly, and had set about organizing the kind of wedding that would make it impossible for anyone to suggest his bride was anything less than valued. The guest list included half the peerage. The flowers were being shipped from 3 different countries. The wedding gown, designed by London's most exclusive modiste, required 6 fittings and cost more than Josie's family had spent on clothing in the past decade. "This is absurd," Josie said during the final fitting, standing on a platform while the modiste and her assistants fussed with the train. "I look like a cream puff that's been attacked by a lace factory." "You look beautiful." Lady Harriet, who had travelled from Yorkshire specifically to help with preparations, regarded her with satisfaction from a nearby settee. "Sebastian will weep when he sees you." "Sebastian doesn't weep. He wept when he read William's letter. He told me." The old woman's expression softened. "He's changing, Josephine. Because of you. He smiles now. He laughs. Yesterday he made a joke, an actual joke, with wit and timing and everything, and I nearly fell off my chair." Josie felt her eyes prickle with tears. "Don't make me cry. If I ruin this gown, the modiste will murder me." "Then I'll save the emotional revelations for later." Lady Harriet rose and crossed to the platform, reaching up to take Josie's hands. "I want you to know, I want you to truly understand how grateful I am. For you, for what you've done for him." "I haven't done anything except love him." "That's exactly what you've done, and it's everything." Lady Harriet squeezed her fingers. "Welcome to the family, my dear. We're not always easy, but we're fiercely loyal to those who earn our love, and you have more than earned it." The night before the wedding, Josie couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed in the townhouse Sebastian had rented for her family, because of course he had rented them a townhouse, because he couldn't bear the thought of his future wife spending her last night as Miss Blackwell in a cramped guest room, and stared at the ceiling, her mind racing with everything that could go wrong. What if she tripped on her train? What if she forgot her vows? What if Sebastian came to his senses at the last moment and realized he was making a terrible mistake? A tap at her window startled her from her spiraling thoughts. She sat up, heart pounding, and saw a familiar silhouette on the narrow ledge outside, tall, broad-shouldered, entirely inappropriate for the hour and location. "Sebastian?" She threw off her covers and hurried to the window, pushing it open. "What are you doing? We're not supposed to see each other before the wedding. It's bad luck." "I don't believe in luck." He was grinning, actually grinning, his dark eyes bright with mischief. "And I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about you, alone in your room, possibly panicking about tomorrow. You are panicking, aren't you?" "I was not panicking. I was spiraling thoughtfully." "Same thing." He reached out a hand. "Come out here with me." "Sebastian, this is a ledge, on the 3rd floor, in London." "I know. But there's a flat section of roof just around the corner with an excellent view of the stars. I thought we could watch them together, for old time's sake." It was insane. It was reckless. It was exactly the kind of thing sensible Josie Blackwell would never do. She took his hand. The ledge was narrow but manageable, and Sebastian guided her around the corner to where a flat section of roof spread out like a private terrace. He had already laid out blankets and cushions, creating a cozy nest beneath the stars. "You planned this," she accused. "I hoped." He helped her settle onto the blankets, then lay down beside her, one arm behind his head. "I wanted to give you something. A memory. Before tomorrow changes everything." "What kind of memory?" "This." He gestured at the sky above them, scattered with stars despite the city's lights. "You and me. Alone. On a rooftop, just like the night we met. Except this time, I'm not going to let you go." Josie felt tears prick her eyes. "Sebastian, I never told you what I was doing that night, when you appeared on my windowsill." He turned his head to look at her, his expression vulnerable in a way she rarely saw. "I was saying goodbye." Her heart clenched. Goodbye? To the world. To life. I hadn't decided anything specific, but I was considering my options. Standing at that window, staring at the drop, wondering if anyone would miss me if I weren't there anymore. "Sebastian." And then you appeared. His voice cracked slightly. This fierce, freckled woman in her nightgown, climbing across ledges to save her sister, completely unaware that she was about to save me too. When I grabbed your wrist, I wasn't thinking about propriety or consequences. I was thinking, this is a person who loves someone enough to risk everything. I want to know what that feels like. Josie reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Do you know now?" "I know now." He lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "I know because of you. Because you looked at me and saw something worth saving. Because you climbed through my window and into my life and refused to leave, even when I gave you every reason to. You gave me plenty of reasons to stay. Did I? I seem to recall being cold, difficult, and emotionally unavailable for the first several weeks of our acquaintance. You were also brilliant, kind, and devastatingly handsome." She smiled at his surprised expression. "Did you think I didn't notice? I noticed everything about you, Sebastian, from the first moment." "Everything?" "Everything." She propped herself up on one elbow to look down at him. "I noticed that you watched me as much as I watched you. That you listened when I talked about accounts and tenants and estate management, really listened, like what I said mattered. That you brought me tea without asking when I worked late in the library. That you looked at me like I was something precious, even when you were telling yourself you didn't deserve to. I didn't deserve to. I don't... Stop. She pressed a finger to his lips. You don't get to decide that anymore. I've decided you deserve everything good in this world, and I'm going to spend the rest of our lives proving it to you, whether you like it or not. His eyes glistened in the starlight. You're very bossy. I prefer assertive. We've discussed this. He laughed, then a real laugh, full and warm, and pulled her down to kiss her. The kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise rather than passion, and Josie melted into it with a sigh. When they finally pulled apart, she settled against his side, her head on his shoulder, and watched the stars wheel slowly overhead. "Tell me about our life," she said quietly. "What will it be like? After tomorrow?" His arm tightened around her. "We'll return to Thornwood. Properly. This time you as the Duchess, not the secretary. We'll finish the estate reforms you started. Build new roofs for the tenant cottages. Raise the teacher's salary until we find someone excellent. And then? Then we'll fill that enormous house with noise and light and life. Open the shuttered rooms. Host dinner parties and summer fetes and all the things I've avoided for 5 years." A pause. "We'll have children, if you want them." Josie's breath caught. "Do you want them?" "I want..." He was quiet for a long moment. "I want to give a child the childhood I never had. One with love and warmth and parents who smile at each other across the breakfast table. I want to watch our son or daughter grow up knowing they're valued for who they are, not what they can accomplish." His voice roughened. "I want to be the father my father never was." "Then we'll do that." She pressed a kiss to his jaw. "All of it. Together." They lay in silence for a long while, wrapped in blankets and each other, watching the stars fade as dawn approached. Finally, Sebastian stirred. "I should go, before the household wakes and finds us missing." Probably wise. She didn't move. "If anyone sees me climbing out your window the night before our wedding, the scandal sheets will never recover. They'll probably write another ballad. God forbid." He sat up, pulling her with him, and cradled her face in his hands. "Tomorrow, you become my wife, my Duchess, my partner in everything. Are you nervous?" "Terrified." He smiled. "But for the first time in 5 years, it's a good kind of terror. The kind that means something wonderful is about to happen." He kissed her one last time, long and slow and full of promise. Then he helped her back through the window and disappeared along the ledge, a shadow against the lightening sky. Josie watched him go, her heart so full it ached. Tomorrow, everything would change. She couldn't wait. The wedding of Sebastian Ashworth, Duke of Thornwood, to Miss Josephine Blackwell was, by all accounts, the social event of the season. St. George's Church in Hanover Square was filled to capacity with peers, their wives, their marriageable daughters, and dozens of curious onlookers who had no invitation but couldn't bear to miss the spectacle. The flowers alone cost more than a year's wages for most Londoners, great cascades of white roses and lilies, filling the air with sweetness and the columns with colour. Josie saw none of it. She stood at the back of the church, her hand trembling on her father's arm, and saw only Sebastian waiting at the altar in his midnight blue coat, his face pale with emotion, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Ready?" her father whispered. "Not even slightly." She squared her shoulders. "Let's go anyway." The walk down the aisle took an eternity. Every eye in the church was upon her, evaluating her gown, her hair, her worthiness to become a duchess. She heard whispers, some admiring, some skeptical, some outright hostile, and she ignored all of them. Because Sebastian was looking at her like she was the sun, the moon, and every star in the sky. When she reached the altar, he took her hands in his, and she felt the tremor in his fingers. "You're shaking," she whispered. "So are you." "It's been a very stressful morning." "You look beautiful." "You're supposed to say that." "I'm supposed to say it because it's true." His thumbs traced circles on her palms. "I've been standing here for 20 minutes, watching the door, terrified you'd change your mind. I climbed a ledge for you. Twice. I'm not changing my mind." The vicar cleared his throat. The ceremony began. Josie barely heard the words, the familiar prayers and exhortations, the questions asked and answered, the ritual that had bound couples together for centuries. She was too lost in Sebastian's eyes, too overwhelmed by the reality of what was happening. She was marrying him. She was actually marrying him. "I, Sebastian James Ashworth, take thee, Josephine Marie Blackwell, to be my wedded wife." His voice was steady now, strong and sure, and the words washed over her like a blessing. "To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part." Then it was her turn, and her voice came out steadier than she expected. "I, Josephine Marie Blackwell, take thee, Sebastian James Ashworth, to be my wedded husband." She meant every word, every syllable, every promise and vow and commitment. She meant with her whole heart. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, Sebastian kissed her with a tenderness that made her eyes sting. "My wife," he murmured against her lips. "My husband." She smiled up at him. "What happens now?" "Now?" He offered her his arm. "Now we face the world together." They turned to face the congregation, and Josie saw a sea of faces, some smiling, some scowling, some openly weeping. She saw her mother, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. She saw Lily, radiant and proud. She saw Lady Harriet, nodding with fierce satisfaction. And she saw, in the back of the church, a man with golden hair and cold eyes, Marcus Ashworth, watching the proceedings with an expression she couldn't read. But whatever he was thinking, whatever he was planning, it didn't matter. Sebastian was hers now, and she was his, and nothing anyone did could change that. They walked down the aisle together, husband and wife, into a future bright with possibility. The wedding breakfast was a blur of toasts, congratulations, and elaborate food Josie couldn't taste. She smiled until her face ached. She accepted felicitations from people whose names she couldn't remember. She danced with Sebastian, with her father, with various lords and gentlemen who wanted to say they'd waltzed with the new Duchess of Thornwood. Through it all, Sebastian stayed close, his hand on her back, his eyes finding hers across crowded rooms, his presence a steady anchor in the chaos. "Tired?" he asked, appearing at her elbow with a glass of champagne. "Exhausted." She accepted the glass gratefully. "Is it always like this, being a duchess?" "Not always. Today is exceptional." He guided her toward a quiet corner. "Tomorrow we leave for Thornwood, and you can hibernate for a week if you like." "That sounds heavenly." She leaned against him, propriety be damned. "Just us, in that enormous house, with no one to perform for. Just us." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Although I should warn you, Lady Harriet has moved back into the Abbey. She claims it's to help you adjust to your new role, but I suspect she simply wants to watch us be happy." "I don't mind. I like your aunt." "She likes you too. She told me yesterday that you're the best thing that's ever happened to our family, and if I ever make you unhappy, She'll disinherit me. Can she do that? Absolutely not. But she'd find a way. He smiled down at her. Are you happy, Josie? Truly? Truly? She reached up to touch his face. I'm happier than I ever knew was possible. Good. He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. Because I intend to make you happier still. They returned to Thornwood Abbey as the autumn leaves were reaching their peak, the moors blazing with orange and gold and deep russet red. The household staff lined up to greet them, Mrs. Crawford with tears in her eyes, Sarah the maid bouncing with excitement, a dozen others whose names Josie was still learning. Welcome home, Your Grace, Mrs. Crawford said, curtsying. Welcome home, both of you. Your Grace. The title still felt strange, like a costume that didn't quite fit. But Sebastian's hand was warm in hers, and the Abbey's great doors stood open, and for the first time since she'd arrived here as a supposed secretary, it truly felt like home. Thank you, Mrs. Crawford. Josie smiled at the assembled staff. I know the past weeks have been chaotic, but I want you all to know nothing essential is going to change. This is still your home, still your workplace. I'm simply an addition to the family. An addition who's already transformed the household accounts, Mrs. Crawford said dryly. I think we'll manage, Your Grace. The staff dispersed to their duties, and Sebastian led Josie through the familiar halls, but they weren't quite familiar anymore. Someone had opened all the shuttered windows. The heavy draperies had been replaced with lighter fabrics that let the autumn sunshine pour in. Fresh flowers filled every surface, and the air smelled of beeswax and lemon polish instead of dust and sorrow. Lady Harriet's doing, Sebastian said, reading her expression. She wrote ahead. Told the staff it was time to bring the house back to life. It's beautiful. Josie spun slowly, taking it all in. It's like a completely different place. It's the same place, just ready to be happy again. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Ready for us to fill it with new memories? She leaned back against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady against her shoulder blades. Outside the windows, the moors stretched toward the horizon, beautiful and wild and endless. Show me the rest, she said. Show me our home. He did. They wandered through the Abbey for hours, Sebastian pointing out his favourite rooms, the library where he'd spent countless nights with William, the tower room where he'd hidden as a child to escape his father's coldness, the small chapel where generations of Ashworths had married and been buried. He showed her the kitchens, the servants' quarters, the stables where his prize horses waited. He showed her the gardens, overgrown now but still beautiful, and the ornamental lake where swans glided through their own reflections. And he showed her their bedroom. It was in the east wing, overlooking the moors, with a massive four-poster bed and a fireplace large enough to roast an ox. The previous Duke's taste had run toward the ponderous and dark, but someone, Lady Harriet again, probably had updated the furnishings with lighter colours and softer fabrics. This is yours now, Sebastian said, watching her face. Ours, rather, if you want it. It's enormous. We'll grow into it. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. We'll fill it with books and flowers and dogs and children and so much life that the ghosts finally move out. There are ghosts? Metaphorical ones. He pressed a kiss to her neck. The ones I've been carrying around for 5 years. The ones that kept telling me I didn't deserve this. Josie turned in his arms to face him. And what do they tell you now? Now? His dark eyes searched hers. Now they're quiet. For the first time since William died, they're quiet. Because of you. She pulled him down for a kiss, deep and slow and full of promise. They had a lifetime of kisses ahead of them. She intended to enjoy every single one. The first year of their marriage was a whirlwind. Josie threw herself into the role of Duchess with the same determination she'd applied to everything else in her life. She continued the estate reforms she'd started as Sebastian's secretary, but now she had the authority and resources to truly make a difference. New roofs went on the tenant cottages. The village school found a brilliant new teacher, lured from London by a salary that made her eyes pop. The estate's agricultural practices were modernized, and yields increased by nearly a third. Sebastian worked alongside her, his frozen heart thawing more with every passing day. He smiled now, really smiled, not the grim imitation he'd worn for years, and sometimes he even laughed. He made friends among the neighboring landowners, men who had given up on him years ago and were startled to discover the Stone Duke had melted into someone almost sociable. He even reconciled with his cousin Marcus, who had surprised everyone by falling genuinely in love with the curate's sister and marrying her with indecent haste. "You've changed him," Lady Harriet told Josie one afternoon over tea in the Dower House. "I didn't think it was possible. After William died, I thought Sebastian was lost forever." "He wasn't lost." Josie set down her teacup. "He was hiding. There's a difference." "How did you know? How did you see past all those walls?" "I didn't see past them. I climbed over them." Josie smiled at the memory. "Literally, in the beginning." Lady Harriet laughed. "The window story. He told me, but I wasn't sure I believed him. Every word was true. I miscounted the doors, climbed out the wrong window, and found a duke instead of a villain." Josie's smile softened. "He caught my wrist and refused to let go. That's when I knew." "Knew what?" "That he was worth saving." She met Lady Harriet's eyes. That beneath all that ice was a heart so desperate to love that it was practically screaming for help. "I just answered." Lady Harriet reached across the table and took her hand. "You're a treasure, Josephine. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Spring came to the moors in a burst of purple and gold, the heather blooming across the hillsides in waves of colour. Josie woke each morning to birdsong and sunshine, to Sebastian's arms around her and his breath warm against her neck, and to the realization that something had changed. She said nothing at first. She was a practical woman, and practical women didn't make dramatic announcements without evidence. She tracked the calendar. She observed her own symptoms with clinical detachment. She consulted quietly with the local midwife, swearing her to secrecy. By the time she was certain, nearly 2 months had passed. She told Sebastian on a cool April evening, sitting together on the ledge outside their bedroom window, a tradition they'd continued from their courtship, climbing out to watch the stars whenever the mood struck them. "I have something to tell you," she said. He turned to look at her, his expression immediately worried. "What is it? Is something wrong? Are you ill?" "I'm not ill." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "I'm pregnant." Sebastian went very still. For a long moment he didn't speak, didn't move, didn't seem to breathe. Then slowly his eyes filled with tears. "A baby," he whispered. "A baby." She watched his face carefully. Is this all right? I know we talked about children, but..." He pulled her into his arms so suddenly she squeaked. "All right. Josie, I don't have words. There aren't words. There are definitely words. You just have to find them." He laughed, a wet sound against her hair. "A baby. Our baby. We're going to be parents. Terrifying, isn't it? Terrifying. Wonderful. Impossible." He pulled back to look at her, his dark eyes shining. "I never thought after William. After everything, I never thought I would have this. A wife I adore. A child on the way. A future worth looking forward to. And now? Now I have everything." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You've given me everything, Josie. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. You could start by not panicking every time I feel slightly tired for the next 7 months. I make no promises." But he was smiling, really smiling, with a joy so profound it transformed his entire face. "When did you know?" "About 6 weeks ago. I wanted to be sure before I told you." 6 weeks? You kept this secret for 6 weeks? I didn't want to get your hopes up if I was wrong." "You're never wrong." He kissed her properly this time, slow and deep. "You're the most remarkable woman I've ever known, and I fall more in love with you every single day." "Good." She smiled against his lips. "Because you're stuck with me now, for at least the next 18 years or so." "Only 18? Well, after that our child might want some independence." "Our child." He said the words like a prayer. "Our child." They sat together on the ledge, wrapped in each other's arms, and watched the stars come out. Everything they'd been through, the scandal, the secrets, the grief and the healing, had led to this moment. And this moment was only the beginning. William Sebastian Ashworth was born on a stormy December night, screaming his lungs out as if personally offended by the indignity of birth. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, and from his first moment of life, he had the entire household wrapped around his tiny finger. Sebastian held his son for the first time with hands that trembled, tears streaming down his face. "William," he whispered, "my brother's name." It felt right. Josie was exhausted, her hair a tangled mess, and her body aching from hours of labor, but she had never felt more triumphant. He would have wanted this, to have his name live on. He would have loved you. Sebastian pressed a kiss to the baby's forehead. He would have adored you, actually. Teased me mercilessly about finally finding someone willing to put up with me. I don't put up with you. I chose you. That's even more remarkable. He looked up at her, his dark eyes bright with emotion. Thank you, Josie, for everything. For William, and for saving me, and for giving me a life worth living. Thank me by changing his nappy occasionally. I'll change every nappy. I'll be the nappy-changing champion of Yorkshire. Let's not get carried away. He laughed, the sound full and warm and free, and leaned down to kiss her. Their son made a noise of protest at being jostled. He has opinions, Josie observed. He takes after his mother. Good. His mother has excellent opinions. 3 years later, Harriet Catherine Ashworth arrived a flame-haired whirlwind with her mother's freckles and her father's intensity. She was named for Lady Harriet, who wept with joy and immediately declared herself the child's official spoiler. The old woman had grown frailer over the years, but her spirit remained indomitable, and she doted on both children with a fervour that bordered on alarming. "You'll turn them into monsters," Josie said one afternoon, watching Lady Harriet sneak William an extra biscuit. "I'll turn them into Ashworths. Same thing, really." The old woman smiled. "My brother Sebastian's father was a cold, cruel man. He raised his sons to believe that love was weakness and joy was frivolous. William rebelled against that, and it cost him his life. Sebastian retreated into ice, and it nearly cost him his soul. And now? Now look at them." Lady Harriet nodded toward the garden, where Sebastian was teaching William to identify plants, while Harriet toddled after them, grabbing at everything in reach. "Joy, life, love, everything my brother tried to stamp out, flourishing in spite of him." Josie felt tears prick her eyes. He would have hated this, wouldn't he? The old Duke. With every fibre of his being. Lady Harriet's smile turned fierce. "And that's exactly why it's so delicious." The years passed in a blur of happiness, challenges, and small, ordinary miracles. William grew into a serious, thoughtful boy, with his father's love of books and his mother's head for numbers. By age 6, he was helping Josie with the household accounts, his small brow furrowed in concentration as he added columns of figures. Harriet grew into a wild, fearless girl who climbed every tree on the estate and declared her intention to become a pirate at least 3 times a week. She had her father wrapped around her finger and used this power shamelessly. Sebastian's transformation continued, deepening with each passing year. The Stone Duke became a distant memory, replaced by a man who laughed easily, loved fiercely, and never missed an opportunity to tell his wife and children how much they meant to him. "You've gone soft," Marcus teased during one of his visits, watching Sebastian chase Harriet around the garden while she shrieked with laughter. "Completely," Sebastian agreed, catching his daughter and swinging her up onto his shoulders. "It's wonderful. You're making the rest of us look bad. You could try being happy. I hear it's becoming fashionable." Marcus rolled his eyes, but he was smiling. His own wife was expecting their second child, and the rivalry between the cousins had mellowed into something almost like friendship. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Sebastian found Josie in the library, their favorite room now, filled with comfortable chairs and overflowing bookshelves and memories of 1,000 quiet evenings together. "Come with me," he said, offering her his hand. "Where?" "You'll see." He led her through the darkened house and up the stairs to their bedroom, then through the window and onto the ledge they'd claimed as their own so many years ago. The summer night was warm, the sky blazing with stars. They settled onto their usual spot, wrapped in blankets despite the mild weather, and simply breathed together. 7 years, Sebastian said quietly. 7 years since you climbed out the wrong window and into my life. Has it really been that long? 7 years, 2 months, and 16 days. I've been counting. Josie laughed. You always were good with numbers. I learned from the best. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her hair. I've been thinking about that night, the night we met. What about it? I was ready to die, Josie. Standing at that window, watching the dark, waiting for the courage to step off the ledge and end everything. His voice was soft, wondering. And then you appeared. This copper-haired apparition in a white nightgown, whispering wrong room like it explained everything. It did explain everything. I was in the wrong room. You were in exactly the right room. He turned to face her, his dark eyes serious. You saved my life that night. Not just by being there, but by being you. By needing help. By giving me someone to care about besides my own grief. Sebastian, let me finish. He took her hands in his. I've spent 7 years trying to figure out how to thank you, how to repay a debt that can never be repaid, and I've finally realized I can't. There's nothing I can do or say or give that would ever be enough. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything, but that's not the point. He lifted her hands to his lips. The point is, you gave me this life, this family, this happiness I never thought I deserved, and every single day I wake up grateful. Every single day I fall in love with you all over again. Josie felt tears sliding down her cheeks. You're making me cry. Good tears. The best tears. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and she tasted salt on his lips. Her tears, or his. She couldn't tell any more. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her head on his shoulder and gazed up at the stars. Tell me something, she said. Anything. If you could go back to that night, the night I climbed through your window, knowing everything that would happen, all the scandal and the struggle and the gossip, would you still catch my wrist? Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. Then softly, "I would have jumped off the ledge after you." Josie laughed through her tears. "That seems excessive." "Nothing about you is excessive. You're exactly right." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You've always been exactly right. From the first moment. I just needed time to see it. And now? Now I see everything." He tightened his arms around her. "I see our children growing up happy and loved. I see our estate thriving under your brilliant management. I see Lady Harriet spoiling our grandchildren someday, assuming she lives forever, which I fully expect her to do out of sheer stubbornness." Josie laughed. "She would too. I see you, Josie. I see you and I love you, and I thank God every single day that you climbed out the wrong window and into my life." She turned in his arms to face him properly, framing his face with her hands. "I love you too," she said. "I loved you when you were cold and difficult and determined to push everyone away. I loved you when you let me in despite yourself. I love you now, warm and happy and surrounded by the family we built together. I will love you forever, Sebastian, in this life and whatever comes after." "Forever," he repeated. "I can work with forever." He kissed her, and she kissed him back, and the stars wheeled overhead, and the moors stretched endlessly around them, and somewhere in the house below, their children slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams children dream. 7 years ago, Josie Blackwell had been sensible and practical and invisible, sitting in corners with books and wanting nothing for herself. Now she was the Duchess of Thornwood, beloved wife, devoted mother, and the woman who had climbed through the wrong window and found exactly the right life. She wouldn't change a single moment of the journey that had brought her here, not even the terrifying parts, especially not those. On a golden autumn afternoon, 10 years after the night that changed everything, Josie climbed out their bedroom window and onto the familiar ledge. She was 44 now, with silver threading through her copper hair and lines around her eyes that Sebastian insisted made her more beautiful than ever. Sebastian followed her, moving more carefully than he once had. They were neither of them young anymore, and settled beside her on their favourite spot. Below them, in the garden, William was teaching young Harriet how to play croquet, while Lady Harriet, miraculously still alive at 87, having apparently willed herself to live forever, just as Sebastian predicted, watched from a cushioned chair and offered unsolicited advice. "Wrong room," Josie said softly. Sebastian turned to look at her, surprise and memory flickering in his dark eyes. "What?" "That's what I said. That night, when you caught my wrist." She reached out and took his hand. "Wrong room," I whispered, "and you didn't let go." "I never could have." He raised her hand to his lips. "Even then, I think I knew. You were the breaking of every wall I'd built, Josephine. I was simply too afraid to see it." She leaned against him, feeling his warmth, hearing his steady heartbeat. "I'm glad you caught me," she said. "I'm glad you stayed." "Where else would I go?" She smiled up at him. "This is home. You are home. You've been home since the moment you refused to let go of a strange woman in her nightgown who was clearly up to something suspicious. To be fair, you were very obviously up to something suspicious. I was saving my sister, and I was saving myself." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "By catching you." Below them, Harriet hit a croquet ball with excessive force, sending it careening into Lady Harriet's chair. The old woman shouted something indignant. William started laughing. The late afternoon sun painted everything gold. "I never thanked you," Josie said quietly. "For what?" "For not letting go." Sebastian pulled her closer, his arm warm around her shoulders, and together they watched their children play in the garden they'd brought back to life. "I never could have," he said again. And in the golden light of a perfect autumn afternoon, surrounded by the family they'd built and the love they'd chosen, the Duke and Duchess of Thornwood sat together on their ledge, not hiding. Not running, just home,